Hello, welcome to the Sound of Science, the place where we deconstruct unscientific bogus and silly scams. Let's go get them. Hello, you wonderful critical thinkers. Thank you so much for watching. Now, I know that I told you that I wouldn't make any more videos about the guy calling himself Topics of Religion, because most of his recent videos are mainly him telling how other people have low intellect and are liars, and he rarely demonstrates anything by producing specific and verifiable examples, quotes, evidence, sources, etc. He himself thinks that he has produced some kind of body of knowledge on certain topics because he has uploaded about 800 videos on his channel. Now, I watched the last 20 of those videos, and in those videos he spent most of his time producing empty rants with little to no substance, which is rather boring, so I basically was done with him. But lo and behold, yesterday this guy uploaded a video about an actual topic that is relevant for theism and atheism, and that is the burden of proof. So I couldn't resist and watched that video, and his video is hilarious. Again, he demonstrates to be clueless on everything he talks about. So I thought it is worth your time to watch another video about this guy, because it simply is comedy gold. So let's do this.
This video is called Burden of Proof. All over the internet I find tons and tons of videos and comments of atheists saying the burden of proof falls on you. That's a cop-out. What are we proving or disproving? The burden of proof is on who? Let's talk about that for a second.
Well, I've told you before, maybe you should not start talking right away. Maybe you should first look things up and educate yourself just for a few minutes. That is all it takes. That would have two important advantages. First, you would reduce the risk of making a fool of yourself again. And second, if you were to base your statements upon actual verifiable facts and data, and back them up with some reliable sources, then your message would be much more clear, and it would be anticipated as more qualitative by your viewers. So then, instead of you being trolled, which you often complain about, people perhaps would try to have an actual conversation with you. But that only happens if you're prepared to do a bit more homework than you do now. But okay, back to the burden of proof, which indeed is an important topic within the realm of religious matters.
Where did the word atheist come from? I'm not talking about the definition. We know that the definition is not believing in God because there's not enough evidence, they say. There's tons of evidence, they just refuse it.
Yes, we reject that supposed evidence for the existence of your God, because at best it is extremely weak evidence that basically doesn't prove anything. Many of you Christian apologists simply do not understand what evidence is, or can hardly distinguish between good and bad evidence. But let's indeed move on to the burden of proof.
What had to come first before the atheist came around? You don't have somebody who denies a religion or a premise of God until it exists. So therefore, Christianity had to be first. Then the atheists came along and they turned away from Christianity. They turned away from God.
Sweet mother of Gandalf, where to even begin? Topics of religion. Although you supposedly made hundreds of videos about atheism, you still don't understand what atheism is. Do you understand what the A in atheism stands for? It is for not or without. So anyone who's not a theist is a non-theist and therefore an atheist. So obviously before gods were conceived, everyone was an atheist. Someone who has never been exposed to religious beliefs in any form, and who has never given that any kind of thought, does not believe in the existence of a god and therefore is an atheist. The main thing that many Christians don't understand about atheism is that atheism is not about something you do. It is about something that you don't do. So let me try to dumb it down a bit. What do you think came first? Playing tennis or not playing tennis? That's an easy one, isn't it? So what came first, believing in a god or not believing in a god? That's right, not believing in a god was first. Now, of course, once humans started to create gods and started to claim all sorts of things about their gods, then more explicit forms of atheism could emerge. Atheists then started to actively reject specific claims about specific gods. But that is a second phase of atheism. The only thing that all atheists have in common is not believing in a god. And that means that before man started to make up their gods, everyone was an atheist. But of course, you're making another mistake which is even more embarrassing. So let's play the last part of that clip again.
So therefore, Christianity had to be first. Then the atheists came along and they turned away from Christianity. They turned away from God.
Sweet auntie of Bilbo Baggins. He really said that, didn't he? Okay, let's assume for a moment that we go along with your flawed understanding of what atheism is, and assume for a moment that atheism purely is a reaction to theism. So theists invented gods, and then other people started to deny the existence of those gods, and we call these people atheists. So what do you think came first, Christianity or other religions? Well, Christianity is about 2,000 years old. Belief in the ancient Greek gods is about 3,000 years old. Hinduism is about 4,000 years old. Belief in the ancient Egyptian gods is about 5,000 years old. And in all these eras there have been atheists who rejected those gods. Prominent examples were the Savarkar, which was an atheist school of philosophy in India, centuries before Christianity was invented. The famous Greek philosophers like Democritus, Critias, and Epicurus were all atheists centuries before Christianity came into existence. So no, atheists came way before Christianity.
I have a video about, what's it called, Zionism or what? Zionism? I don't know, something like that.
Excuse me, what? You don't know what that is or how to pronounce that? And this is what your videos look like on YouTube? Look at the watermark that you put in the right lower corner of your videos.
I have a video about, what's it called, Zionism or what? Zionism? I don't know, something like that. I have a video about, what's it called, Zionism or what? Zionism? I don't know, something like that.
Okay, so I hope we all recovered a bit from that. Now, please continue your failed explanation of the burden of proof.
Christianity was first. Then atheists who rebelled against it, didn't want anything to do with it, and said there is no God, came second.
No. As I demonstrated in twofold, atheism came at least centuries before Christianity. But what is the point to all of that? How is that relevant to anything?
So who is the burden of proof? We had original Christianity. Long before we had atheists, we had Christianity. The burden of proof is on the person that's a naysayer who says there is no God, this religion's bogus.
This is absolutely hilarious. He thinks that the burden of proof depends on the order in which claims are made. So if I make a claim first, then he has the burden of proof. So, okay, let's claim that invisible and immaterial vampires exist, who only reveal themselves to those who have faith in them. There you are, dude. Now you've got the burden of proof on that claim, because I was first. But of course, his totally ridiculous idea about the burden of proof even backfires on him without my vampire claim, because again, for example, Hinduism preceded Christianity by centuries. They were first. They claim that thousands of gods exist, and none of them looks anything like the Christian God. And then you, topics of religion, you come along. You're a naysayer. You come up with this entirely different story about this Christian God. So now you got the burden of proof to demonstrate that the Hindus are wrong, at least according to your own logic.
Now, is this profound? No, it's pretty simple, basic knowledge. It's world life living level 90. It is extremely basic.
No, it's not basic knowledge. It's not even knowledge. It's total nonsense. How can you accuse others of having a low intellect while you continuously spew nonsense without even trying to find out if what you say is true? No, the burden of proof has got nothing to do with the order in which claims are made or who speaks first. The burden of proof is simply on those who make a claim. Anyone who makes a claim has the burden of proof, regardless of being a Christian or an atheist. If you make a claim, you got the burden of proof on that claim. If I make a claim, I got the burden of proof on that claim. That is basic knowledge that you can verify yourself by only spending 10 seconds on Google.
So every time I get that comment online, I respond with that. Do you know how many replies I get after that? That tells me that they don't have anything to reply on.
No, you peanut butter for brains, nobody responds to that because nobody watches your videos, and those who do are probably too much flabbergasted by this level of stupidity to type in any response, and if they were to do that, you remove that response anyway.
Let's see how many of you can come up with something on this video. This will be interesting.
So this was my response to your explanation about the burden of proof, and I have identified 3 major mistakes in your thinking. First, atheism is not the same as actively denying a religion or actively denying a premise about a god. Atheism is not necessarily something you do, but it is rather something you don't do. Just like not playing tennis or not playing chess. Atheism is not believing in a god. Therefore, it's not needed for a religion to exist in order to be an atheist. Before religions were invented, everyone was an atheist, because everyone did not believe in a god. Just like before the invention of tennis, everyone was not playing tennis. Second, atheism did not come after Christianity. Atheism existed centuries before Christianity was invented, simply because there have been thousands of years in which humans existed but religion did not. And even when religions were invented, Christianity came relatively late. There was an atheistic school of philosophy in ancient India, and many of the ancient Greek philosophers were atheists. So first there was atheism, and only later there was Christianity. Third, the burden of proof has got nothing to do with the order in which claims are made. So your entire plea about what came first, Christianity or atheism, is completely useless. And even if it were true that the burden of proof is based upon the order of claims, then you still have the burden of proof on demonstrating that, for example, Hinduism is not true. In reality, the burden of proof is on anyone who makes a claim, which can be verified online in a matter of seconds. Well, that's it for today. Thanks for watching.